Today, I get to put this Italian pocket rocket to the test. It's a limited production 2022 model Fiat 595 Abarth Scorpioneoro Golf Edition. Say that 5 times fast. So I mentioned earlier that this is a limited production car. And how limited are we talking? Well, the Scorpioneoro only have 200 units worldwide made. And the Golf Edition, which is the one that we're in, is only 50. So I'm in one of 50 cars that will ever be made globally. And I do want to thank my friends from Western Motors, which are the ones that lent me this car for a few days. And if the name sounds familiar, it's because they're the same kind of people that lent me the Grand Cherokee L Summit Reserve, which I reviewed recently. If you haven't seen that video, I'll link it up in the description or somewhere. I see YouTubers doing that a lot. I don't know how to do that, so I'm just going to put it in the description for you. Back to this Fiat 595 Abarth, or is it Abarth? Abarth, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. Let me know in the comments what it's meant to be. But anyway, what does the Scorpioneoro Golf Edition actually mean? Well, this is the one that has a gold Scorpion on the hood. Pretty aggressive. It's got gold wheels. It's got the Scorpioneoro in the headrest, if you haven't noticed. And it's got a cool checkered flag on the roof. So those touches generally give the car its character and its naming convention. But for the most part, the Fiat 595s generally come with a very similar power plant. It's the 165 horsepower, or the one that we're in is a 180 horsepower, and the extra boost comes from a bigger turbo made by Garrett. But other than that, it's a 1.4 liter turbocharged engine, 230 Newton meter of torque. Those aren't aggressive numbers, but keep in mind that this is a hot hatch. It's not a sports car, it's not an SUV, it's not a supercar. This is a car that is meant for city driving. It's going to be fun to drive, sporty, nimble, efficient. I would love to throw practicality in that statement, but the back seats aren't that big. Trunk space, 185 liters. It's okay for one or two people, but I wouldn't call it a family transporter. In addition, this has got a 5-speed transmission, and it's what Fiat calls a robotic automatic. Although I feel it's a bit more of a robotic manual, because it does feel a bit like a manual transmission engaging, but there's a cool little robot dude doing his thing every time gears need to be changed. Going through the spec sheet before I got this car, when I learned that it was a 5-speed transmission, I was a bit let down. I was like, 5-speed in an era where cars now have 10-speed transmissions seems a little, insufficient. And I was afraid I'm going to be driving around with high revs, but I don't know how they've done their wizardry on this, where the gear ratios are very sufficient for low-end speed. And on the highway doing 120 to 140, as I was when I was coming back from Abu Dhabi, RPMs were at 3,000 RPM. So it wasn't too bad. I think the 5-speed works. So I've had this car for a few days now. I've been driving it around town, driving it on highways, and I feel at this point I have enough information to give a fair kind of review on this car and shed some light on things that aren't necessarily the best about this car and things that are actually quite nice. Now, the most prominent thing from the annoying list is the seating position. It's way too high for such a car, and you're way too close to the pedals. Like, I'm a tall guy, I'm 183 centimeters, and my feet are way too bent for comfortable driving. And I've got my seat all the way back. And you feel like you're driving somebody else's car temporarily as opposed to being comfortable in your own car. The Koni shocks as well, the suspension setup is a bit too stiff for my liking. Around town it's okay, you don't have that much shake, but on the highway it's nauseating. I drove this from Abu Dhabi to Dubai for an hour and a half doing 140 kilometers an hour approximately, and the thing was shaking so much on the highway, and I believe that would only get worse in Scorpion mode, which we're going to touch on. This car is a Scorpion mode, which firms everything up. You've got the whole steering and suspension and the throttle response and gear ratios, all of that gets updated. So that would actually make the car a bit worse. So this is why I wouldn't recommend this car too much if you're going to be doing a lot of highway miles. But around town, it's quite nice. You don't really feel all of those things that I just said. On hard acceleration, especially in Scorpion mode, so when you've got the car in full attack mode, you want to give it the full beans, the gear changes are just too aggressive. The thing just jolts quite harshly that you feel you're about to break the car. Also, on heavy acceleration, you do kind of feel the torque steer, and I know that's a characteristic of front-wheel drive, but at 180 horsepower, I don't think it should be that evident. Also on the highway at high speeds, if you're going to be doing a lot of highway miles, is you do get a lot of cabin noise from the outside, road noise, the wind. You just feel that it's not necessarily the most quiet car. Again, it's a hatchback. It's not meant to be a GT cruiser, but I have to point that out. Now, I have a few issues with the design of the car. The handbrake is way too close to the seat lever. So a few times when I was driving this car at night, I thought I was pulling the handbrake, turns out I was pulling the seat lever. Thank God the seat doesn't move that much, otherwise that would be annoying. Also, what I find slightly annoying is when I look at the layout of the center console, is that they have everything so nicely laid out. Everything's easy to find, materials feel good and all of that, but the layout itself is a very symmetrical design until you get to the gear selector. For some reason, they've decided that the gear selector should be off-center to the right. Just as an OCD person, it annoys me. On the topic of OCD, the VIN plate is bolted into the A-pillar right there. That's okay. I don't mind that it's there. It's just that the letters and digits of the VIN number are upside down. And it's just like, I want to drill it and flip it and bolt it back in just because I can't read it. I don't know why. There are things that I feel in 2022 cars should have, which sadly this doesn't. Cruise control is one of them. A armrest is another. I'm so used to having something to lean on or put my arm and even have some storage space over here, which sadly this doesn't have. And there's no reverse camera. I mean, there's this lovely screen right here that's plenty of real estate for a camera, but no reverse camera. So I want to get into all of the cool stuff now. And first and foremost is the appeal of the car, the character, the charisma that it brings. It really plays on the fun hot hatch factor. The fact that you can customize this car with so many performance upgrades or have some cool livery around the car with the Scorpion, the color choices you have, it really makes the car stand out on the road. Bringing that into the feel of the car, the way this car feels. I've driven it at high speed. It's been very stable, doesn't play around. I was able to let go of the steering wheel for a bit to see if the car's going to bounce around. It didn't. Driving it around town in the zippy turns of off-ramps and on-ramps, yeah, it doesn't feel like a Porsche 911, but it's not meant to. It's not in that segment of car. It's got the fun hot hatch feel, and it really does deliver on that. Playing into that is the steering, how tight it is. You feel there's minimal play. It is a bit too electric in the sense that it lacks emotion, but you forgive it with just how planted this car is. Power-wise, it's quite sufficient as well. I don't feel that 180 horsepower is too slow. Yeah, it's not going to throw you in the back of your seat. The power is quite nice. It's sufficient. I enjoy it around town. So back on the transmission, I like when I'm positively impressed on something that I thought wasn't going to work, but it does. I think they did a great job with this transmission. Yes, it's a single clutch. Yes, it's a robotized automatic, but it's not uncomfortable at all. The time delay between gears is not offensive. It doesn't remind me of the earlier days of BMW's SMG or maybe Alfa Romeo's Celerspeed. Those were pretty bad, but then again, they were a long time ago. But I think they've done a great job with the gearbox setup. It's comfortable around town. I think it's fair to shed some light on the fuel economy of the car. I've had this car for a few days, done highway miles and predominantly city driving, and I'm getting just under 7 liters per 100 kilometers. I think that's decent. It's not bad. The visibility as well is great on this car. I can see all the way around. I love the fact that the windows don't have that kind of frame rail that guides the window up and down. The entire thing moves up and down, and which adds to the easier visibility. I don't feel it's too claustrophobic in here. Although I'm generally not a fan of smaller cars, it doesn't really have the claustrophobia element that you might feel in a Mini Cooper. I feel a bit more claustrophobic in that car. In terms of the tech of this car, you have the Uconnect 7-inch screen that has Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, so that's quite sufficient for day-to-day needs. You've also got the 6-speaker hi-fi audio system by Beats. So for me, anything that has Dr. Dre's signature has my salute. Overall, I would say the car feels quite well built. I mean, there's no rattles or squeaks. I mean, everything's quite in place where it should be. Steering feels good. I've got Alcantara and carbon fiber goodies, so I think they've done a pleasant job of making this car feel good quality. So we're going to put this car through its paces right now. Let's see what the Scorpion can do. Ooh, a little bit of a crack in that tunnel right there. Pops on upshifts. Feels quite stable. Getting to the first curve now. Let's see. It actually feels quite planted. I'm not having to wrestle with the car. I can talk fine. This is a hot hatch. The Fiat 595. Let's see. Going around this corner. You know what? I get it. I get why this car is popular. I don't condone speeding, but this is a professional driver. In the tunnel, clipping that apex, coming out, holds its gears nicely, and a little bit of a pop on the upshift. You know what? I get it. I didn't get it before. I get it now. And we're out of Scorpion mode. Calm down, little Scorpion. You did well. And that's all I have to say about this car. So I do want to thank you for watching. As always, the support has been great, really. I mean, I have to thank you all for the likes and the shares and the subscribes. Keeps me going. I do want to also thank again Western Motors for lending me this car. And that's it. Thank you for watching.